Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
Welcome, y'all. Welcome to the Switch for Good podcast. I am Dotsie Bausch, and I'm here with Alexandra Paul. And today is Booby Day. We are going to talk all about breast and breast cancer and breast issues and woman issues and woman stuff. We have an amazing guest. Before we dive in, though, Alexandra, you have a powerful personal story as it relates to boobies.
And vegan food. So my mom was diagnosed with a lump on her breast about 3 years ago. And she'd already had, this was about 5 years after she had a tumor on her liver removed. And for both, she refused chemotherapy. She just had some radiation. I was really worried that it might come back. So she's 84 now, and she's always eaten well and exercised regularly. And when she was 66, she did a century ride. And even now with COVID, she does a spinning class via Zoom several times a week. She'd cut down a lot on meat, but she was still eating Greek yogurt because she said that she needed the protein, right? And she was still having butter on her toast every morning. And I don't know if I think she was starting to have almond milk in her coffee. But anyway, I was worried about the dairy because I have read the China study, and we all saw, hopefully, if you haven't, Forks Over Knives. And I wanted her to cut out that dairy. She said it was a little resistant because she really wanted that Greek yogurt because of the protein. And so I did what I often do, which is I asked for my birthday for one present, and that was to watch Forks Over Knives on Netflix. And so, which talks about how dairy can turn on cancer cells, and eating cruciferous vegetables and other plants can turn off cancer cells, which we're going to talk about with Dr. Kristi Funk today. So she watched, and she started actually using pea milk. But after talking to Kristi Funk, now we know that soy milk might even be better. But then she was really resistant to giving up her butter. And so I bought her Miyoko's butter because she didn't want to do margarine. She said, margarine, that's unhealthy. So I bought her Miyoko's butter. And she first resisted it because she said it was too white and she wanted the yellow look. Oh my gosh. But exactly. The excuses that people will give to not change are pretty amazing. But anyway, the last time I went to see her, there she was eating her Miyoko's, and I sort of mentioned it really lightly, and she goes, yes, lightly, and I didn't want to push it in her face or anything. I just said, oh, you're eating Miyoko's again. And she said, yes. I really like it now, and I can't tell a difference. So she'd obviously gotten over the how it looked thing. And anyway, so that was just my story about my mom, and she has not had a recurrence of either cancer. And like I said, it's been 3 or 4 years, and at 84, that's a really good sign. And I really do attribute it to her diet, her lifestyle in general, but a lot her diet. And she's also eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables.
All right. And we're going to learn a lot about specific foods and their power from Dr. Funk. So we're so excited. Let's introduce her and get this rocking. 80 to 90% of all breast cancer is based on our daily choices, according to today's guest, Dr. Kristi Funk. We are super excited to have her here. She's really one of the best in her field. And I think you also are going to find her incredibly, incredibly engaging. And she has a really good sense of humor. So we're going to do some laughing today too, even though it's on a pretty serious subject. If her name does ring a bell for you, you may know her as Angelina Jolie's or Sheryl Crow's breast cancer surgeon. She has nearly 2 decades worth of clinical experience, and she's constantly open to learning more and more. Case in point, she discovered that a plant-based diet was key in reducing one's risk of breast cancer while writing her book, Breasts, the Owner's Manual, in 2017. The book came out in 2018, and if you haven't picked up a copy, I highly recommend it. Dr. Funk, she is a huge advocate of prevention and uses her respected platform not only to help women with breast cancer, but to educate others so they can avoid the disease entirely. Considering 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime, this issue is always relevant and always important. So welcome to the Switch for Good podcast.
Hi, ladies. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. We have so much to talk about.
We do. I have to tell our audience that the very first time I met you, we were both speaking at a PCRM event, and you got on stage with Dr. Barnard, and you guys were doing like an interview back and forth. And you talked about your entry into the work that you do now, and that you were researching for your book, as I mentioned in the intro, and you came across quite a bit of evidence around nutrition. Because I remember you said that your publisher said, hey, if you're going to write this book, you need a chapter on nutrition. You're kind of like, seriously? All right, I guess so. So then you're like, well, I better do some research. And you went down the rabbit hole and realized, holy shit, we should be eating only plants and getting the animal foods out of our diet. And so you said you did it overnight. You have a family, you have children, and you said you went to your refrigerator, packed all the meat and dairy and eggs, and ran it over to your parents' house and said, here you go, it's too late for you.
I did that. However, I have to confess, I never believe it's too late for anyone to reap tremendous health benefits from a change toward plant-based eating. However, my parents are literally 90, so they grew up in the Depression era, and they would never talk to me again if they knew that I threw out $200 or more worth of, perfectly carcinogenic food. So I had to give it to them. But yeah, I dove into nutritional science simply to prove that the way that I ate was correct, which was largely Mediterranean diet style, tons of chicken, turkey, fish. I mean, my husband, Andy, and I ate so much sushi that I'm sure we were radioactive. I never wanted to check mercury levels specifically because I was not going to give up my sushi.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Easily 4 days a week. I mean, we were Toro aficionados. And I was queen of the cheese platter at any party. My cheese platters were the best. 5-year age Gouda, the Manchego. I had it all. And lo and behold, I dive into this info and I am struck, like, boom, straight into the gut and the heart, like just really blown away by the rock solid evidence that truly the only evidence-based way to eat to maximize health and to minimize illness, right? It's a two-way street. The cellular response to animal fat and animal protein is everything that cancer requires. And on the flip side, it's not just like, oh, what do I eat then? I guess plants. No, the plants you're eating are so powerfully packed with these phytochemicals, plant-based chemicals. We prefer the word nutrients just because putting chemicals in your body doesn't sound good, but they are chemicals, like the resveratrol in the skin of red grapes, like the curcumin in turmeric, like the epigallocatechin gallate in green tea, if that doesn't sound like a chemical. So these are chemicals, but they're nutrients, and they go coursing through your veins, saturating your cells, bathing each cell like a little bathtub of nutrients that, depending on what you chose to chew and swallow, is either screaming out pro-cancer or anti-cancer. And yeah, one day I just had enough of this evidence and I ran downstairs and you said I have kids. We have triplet boys who at the time had just turned 8, like a few days earlier. So that was the last ice cream cake they ever had. But boom, just flung open those refrigerator doors with like great panache. And I was like, boys, we're going vegan. And they're like, yeah, what is vegan? And it was such a fabulous ride from that. I mean, it was just 180, like you said. I dumped all this stuff, my $50 salmon fillet that I'd gotten for the next day's barbecue, and all my sacred cheese drawer with all those fancy cheeses. And in it went, and then I would start finding it in sneaky stuff. You know, you get into the freezer and you've got your organic veggie patty, and then in the middle of it all is cheese, milk powder. The boys, they have a hard time forgiving me on this one. It would just happen like a year ago, where I had been making guacamole and I totally cheated on my guac with the McCormick spice pack. That was the taste of guac to me. Like and I added some onion, cilantro, whatever. But the point is, I used the spice pack, and I had used it forever. And we are now like 3 years into being completely vegan, plant-based. And I'm mixing up the guac, and I was like, I guess I better just know how many gross chemicals are in here. Like, what's really? Like, I just figured it was going to be dried onion and spices and pepper and salt and whatnot. 3 times in there, there's milk. There's like condensed milk powder, and whey, or I don't know what it is, but there's 3 different milk. And I was like, and I was like, do I tell them? Did you?
Yeah, it's unbelievable how many little spots they sneak milk into, because we're, rightfully so, for their capitalism, because we're addicted and they know it. And that's probably, in your subconscious, one of the reasons you kept buying the pack, because it's so good.
Right. Oh, for sure. So for those who don't know, the main protein in milk is casein, and the second casein hits your stomach, it turns into casomorphin, which, just like it sounds, morphine, goes whoop, straight to those heroin and drug receptors in your brain, releasing dopamine, that feel-good chemical, saying, give me more of that. And, it's only 1/10 of the signaling capacity of straight up heroin. So you're not going to wake in a gutter with like Manchego tattooed across your chest, but you might, go back for another slice.
Or 10.
Right.
Kristi, can you give us an overview of breast cancer in the United States? In terms of, is it going up or down? What's going on with it in terms of the US, and if you'd like, the world?
Yeah, so around the world, there will be 1.7 million women diagnosed with invasive breast cancer this year. In the United States, there are going to be approximately 268,000 invasive cancers and almost 42,000 in situ, so stage 0 ductal carcinoma in situ cancers. The real thing to center on, though, is that people always say to me, gosh, it seems like it's such a rampant epidemic and it's getting worse and worse and younger and younger. And it's not really true. The rate of breast cancer goes up 0.3% per year. So it's pretty imperceptible to the average, like, computer brain of a mind. But it does seem like it's more ubiquitous simply because it's no longer taboo to be talking about it freely. You've got social media, talking about any celebrity who went through breast cancer treatments, mastectomy, prophylactic mastectomy. You've got people like me invited to fabulous shows, Dr. Oz, Good Morning America, Today Show, etc., just to talk about it. We've got this podcast going on. And, even just 15 years ago, people were like, Facebook, what? Face story? Face? Like, nobody knew what Facebook was 15 years ago, or most people, And so now, all of a sudden, you see that your friend's 25-year-old daughter's friend, who's 22, has breast cancer. And you think, oh, it's just getting younger and younger. But in point of fact, 5% of breast cancer occurs in women under 40 years old. And that stat has not changed since 1985. So it's not getting younger and younger. But the numbers are slowly trickling up. I won't want to dismiss the slow rise, because as we get fatter and unhealthier, that breast cancer rate will never go down. We are 7 times more likely to die of a heart attack than we are breast cancer. We're 26 times more likely to have cardiovascular disease. So it's very exciting for me to be able to wake women up in a frightening moment where I'm so blessed and privileged to come alongside them in this scary time, but they're very open. They're open to what happened, why is this happening to me, and how do I make sure it doesn't happen again? And, it's called the teachable moment. And they're very just receptive without passing any judgment or criticism of, I'm not at all implying like, you did this, like you deserve this, never. But time to wake up. we're contributing unwittingly to our own cancers, to our own heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, obesity, diabetes, depression, acne, all of it. So this is great because people, it's just our nature. You kind of don't want to perseverate on something that hasn't happened. And that doesn't seem like it will happen. Breast cancer doesn't run in my family. That's not my thing. Oh, heart attacks, that's in my family. Well, when they do get this diagnosis, they're very open to understanding how diet and lifestyle, by lifestyle, I mean alcohol, exercise, obesity, taking hormone replacement therapy, environmental toxicities, emotional stress, all of these have to do with that bathtub that I was talking about that you soak your cells in, that are either working for you or against you every single second of your day.
Mm-hmm.
Only 5 to 10% of all breast cancer comes from an inherited genetic mutation, such as BRCA or BRCA, CHEK2, PALB2. There's a handful of them. And most people don't have them. Not to dismiss that if you do have a gene mutation, it's to be taken seriously. We definitely want to have a conversation, up the ante on breast surveillance and other organs that might be at risk because of that mutation. So I'm not dismissing that those mutations exist and it's a real bummer and threat if you carry one, but you're not defenseless against even a gene mutation. Okay. I just want to highlight the other fact, the other stat, that 90 to 95% of all breast cancer has nothing to do with inherited genetics. Huh. All right, well, if you give like maybe 5% to weirdness, to just fate and bad luck, because that happens too. The fictitious 22-year-old I just mentioned, right? She's too young to have even lived long enough, badly enough to have caused the cancer from, just lifestyle alone. So there are some inexplicable cancers, but they are so at the edges of our fat bell curve, and the fatness of 80 to 90+% of all cancer has to do with diet and nutrition and our lifestyle choices. And that's good news. That's super empowering. Because if you didn't realize at the time of a cancer diagnosis that it's not just fate and there's nothing you can do, wake up. There's a ton you can do. You have so much power, sister. I love helping people realize that they just don't have to do the treatments of surgery, chemo, and radiation, take an anti-estrogen pill, kind of the tried and true things we do, and then just hope it all works. Mm-hmm. Every day you can get up with a positive attitude and a plan.
Yeah. You mentioned something really important about that 22-year-old. You said that she hadn't yet lived a long enough life really for her to have been implicit in doing the damage and causing the breast cancer. What is a woman to do if they get breast cancer or are just worried about getting breast cancer and they say, I've already done 50 years of meat and dairy, I've already done the damage. Why would I switch now? What would you say?
My favorite study to bring up to a woman in that position, hey, doc, look at me. I'm 62. I'm overweight. The damage has been done, like you're saying. And this is where I say, let me tell you a quick story. A study took 50 obese women. They didn't have breast cancer. They were just obese and, not as healthy as they could be. And they did two things. They measured IGF-1 levels. What's that? Insulin-Like growth factor. This is the big daddy growth promoter that screams at all of your cells to grow, grow, grow. Your brain is super smart. It tells your liver how much to make for the day, because believe it or not, we have 50 billion cells that we turn over daily inside of us. So thanks to IGF-1, they get replaced. Post-exercise muscles need repairing. Your neurons in your brain need protecting. So IGF-1 has its role. But in excess, if there's more than the daily job for IGF-1, what's it doing? What's it doing? It made a child grow into a man, but if you're already all grown up, your hands aren't going to get bigger. It's screaming at cells to grow into cancer. Cancer, grow into the liver, into the lung, into the bone, into the brain. Grow fat, grow plaque, grow disease. And the only way to make an excess of IGF-1 is to consume animal protein or animal fat. And then the automatic cellular response is to elevate this massive growth promoter. There are people in Ecuador that have a disease called Laron syndrome. They can't respond to IGF-1. Guess what? They're all dwarfs. They don't grow. And no one in the history of the world with Laron syndrome has ever had cancer.
Whoa.
Wow. They've never. One woman, I have to say, was researching this for my book, and I was like, really, really, like I dug so deep, and I finally found one ovarian cancer in 2017, but that's it. They never, ever had, ready for woe number 2, type 2 diabetes. That is how integral to cancer, all cancer, and diabetes type 2, IGF-1 is. Okay, so back to our too late for me lady. 50 obese women come into the study room and they measure their IGF-1 levels. They measure their IGF-1 binding protein, which is like a little body snatcher that retires excess IGF-1 from circulation. And here's the beauty. They take their blood and they drip it on a petri dish made with fresh human breast cancer cells. And a few cells die, because if you're alive, your immune system's doing a little something, something, right? They go away and they're told to follow a whole food plant-based diet and have daily exercise of about 30 minutes. And we're talking sauntering fast, right? Like these are not former Olympians. So they go away for 12 years, months, weeks, days. 12 days. They come back, measure IGF-1 levels, plummeted. Binding protein, skyrocketed. New petri dish with a new layer of human breast cancer cells. Take that new blood, drip it on the petri dish. The majority of cancer cells died on the spot. In less than 2 weeks, they transformed their blood into a cancer kick machine. It is never, ever too late.
Yeah, that goes back to the billion of cells every day that we turn over. I mean, that's because of that turnover, we're able to take action and have it work later in life.
Absolutely. You just infuse a new, brand new, untainted cell in that turnover routine. Let your immune system get a break from having to deal with the catabolic meal, right? Okay, so another favorite study for me to have people understand, because it will transform your eating overnight. I was writing the book, and the book kind of went everywhere with me on my laptop. So I was in the pre-op lounge, the surgeon's lounge, and or doctor's lounge, I should say. And I had my laptop open, and this is it's totally true. I'm not making this up. I am prone to exaggerate sometimes, but not when I'm quoting studies and such. So here I am writing my book, and I'm literally writing what I'm about to share with you as a study. When we'll call him John, anesthesiologist John, sits down at the table across from me, and on his plate is breakfast, which is free at Providence St. John's. Thank you for liking your surgeon's butt. You should see the food in the cafeteria. So he comes with his stack of pancakes, 3 strips of bacon, and then 3 gold foil wrapped pats of butter. And I look, and in my head, my super conscious says, Kristi, don't say anything. Don't be that girl. Don't be that girl. And there goes down the laptop. John, I almost said his real name. John, I have to tell you a story about a study. So here's the story, and then I'll come back to John. It's pretty funny. So this study took 82 men and women, and they fed them a standard American diet. So pancakes and bacon, aka John, or steak and eggs, something very standard. And they measure LDL, oxidized LDL cholesterol, hourly. This is a measure of oxidative stress, of that battle inside your cells to squelch the inflammation and bring calm back to the scene, right? So LDL cholesterol is a marker of that. And so when it goes up, that would be bad. I mean, it has to go up a little bit, but so they measure it. Here they get their breakfast. Up, 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 lunch, hamburger and fries. Up, 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 dinner. These people are going to bed every single night with fewer antioxidants than when they woke up. Same people, same sad meal. Next day, one change. A cup of strawberries. I could pull up this study. I actually have it available as a slide to show you, but just listen to my voice go up or down. The LDL cholesterol, 1 cup of strawberries, pancake, and bacon. Below baseline. Down, down, down for 6 hours till it comes back to baseline. Lunch, hamburger and fries, 1 cup of strawberries. LDL cholesterol down below baseline, down, up, dinner. What? Just the antioxidant power in a mere cup of strawberries is able to immediately nullify all of the inflammatory cascade associated with that bad meal. But what if the chemical power flying through your body had been from steel-cut oats and a bunch of berries with a little flax and cinnamon? Maybe that had been breakfast. Wow, instead of just doing the duking it out battle to nullify the crappy meal, you could have dealt with the super healthy meal quickly and then spent the next 3-4 hours till you ate again, nourishing cells, lowering estrogen, which feeds and fuels 80% of all breast cancer, lowering excess IGF-1, decreasing inflammation, increasing immunity, decreasing oxidative stress. And one other really important superpower of all plant foods, they're anti-angiogenic. That's a mouthful. Angio, blood vessel, Genesis, a book in the Bible, but the birth of, right? So the birth of blood vessels. Every cancer who has a plan to grow beyond the size of a tip of a ballpoint pen must have angiogenesis happen, the birth of blood flow to feed and nourish it. And guess what those little arteries and veins become? Boop, exit strategy. When I get all grown up and big enough as a big bad cancer, straight out to lung, liver, brain, and bone. Anti-angiogenesis is what you're going to get from that cup of strawberries. And we kind of rattled through a few chemicals before, but that's also true, right? The omega-3 fatty acids you're getting from flax, or the genistein in soy, the procyanidins in those strawberries, they're all working for you and never against you. And that is the beauty, because you can have a meat lover maybe bring up something, right? Does, I don't know, B12, something that they're getting, iron, protein. There is whatever little morsel of goodness you might want to try to extract from a cow flank. It is superseded by all the negativity that's happening on a cellular level inside your body. So back to John, I tell him this story and he's like, huh. And this is telling, and I think he wanted to get into this a bit, Dotsie, he said, huh, and this isn't to disparage him. He looked at me honestly and he goes, do you think what I eat matters?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it matters so much. Yes. Huh. There's a urologist, prostate cancer surgeon. He was talking about this the other day too. He thinks it really matters what you eat. And I was like, I don't blame him one bit. I knew probably being a girl, right? Weight conscious forever. Growing up in the 80s, no bread, pasta, rice, or potatoes, because even looking at that would make me fat. Like, I was food conscious, but I wasn't smart and research and evidence-based about what I was eating and why. But I certainly knew food mattered, right? But not to the degree that I get it now. And so there was nothing to be said to him other than like, it matters, and I'm going to give you a copy of my book when it's done. I'll tell you though, every single time I go in the doctor's lounge, I am not lying. And this has probably been at least 45 times that I've walked in and I've seen John sitting there with pizza, terrible meals, always a cup of strawberries, always. I'm like, you can do blueberries. You can mix it up. It doesn't just have to be strawberries, but he always has the strawberries. And you know what? That's a step in the right direction, because look, hear the graph that I talked about, LDL cholesterol straight up, or down, just from the strawberries. So it's a strategic side dish, as I call it. It'll help, but what if, right? What if the whole meal had just been plant-based awesomeness?
Let's talk more about the specific foods that you are a huge proponent of in terms of breast cancer, because I heard you on the Exam Room podcast do a show just about food. And so you included soy in there, and you mentioned soy earlier. So let's start off with that. And then if you could list some of the really powerful foods that people need to get into their diets to really fight those cancer cells, and if there's any plant-based foods they should avoid.
Let's talk about soy. Let's bust that myth wide open, because it's gotten a really bad rap. Oh, I don't know, from people like me that for 18 years told every breast cancer patient, to just spit that miso out of your mouth. What are you thinking? There's phytoestrogens in there. See, I knew a little bit about food.
Real quick before we go into that, I want to go back to soy and the reason that for 18 years you might have told people to stay away from it, because I remember a study that was at least 20 years ago that my OBGYN is still referring to,
right,
of the breast cancer receptors, the soy receptors on breast cancer. And why is that still lasting when we've had so many other studies that have shown the opposite? Why are so many OBGYNs still holding on to that, or gynecologists?
There's just no update to their education. Now, after a really long day of, operating, maybe delivering babies and then seeing patients back to back to back, doing charting, maybe they got kids at home and they just want to go exercise or whatever. Really, you think they're going to go home and flip through a nutrition journal, even a very reputable one, looking for some pearls they can share for free with their patients, because they don't get paid to do risk reduction counseling, right? So let's talk about soy and bust this myth open, because I fell prey to it. For a long time, we only knew that there were estrogen receptors on 80% of breast cancers. And when estrogen hits that receptor, it's going to send a signal to the cancer cell to multiply and divide. All right, so enter my breast cancer patient with the pathology report tells me what percentage of the cancer cells express an estrogen receptor. It can be anywhere from 0 to 100%, and what affinity that receptor has for estrogen, measured as 1, 2, or 3 plus. So I might say to this lady, you've got an 85% estrogen-driven tumor that loves estrogen. Do you really think that the phytoestrogen, the plant-based estrogen that has the chemical little looking structure with the hexagons and octagons, that it isn't a key fitting right into that same lock? That receptor doesn't know, oh, no, that estrogen didn't come from an ovary, I'm not having it. No, it's going to activate, or we don't know, but how much do you love soy? Stop drinking soy. All right, moving on. And then I move on. Now, enter me writing my book, having to be correct about every single fact I wrote. I mean, even the estrogen thing, 80% of blah, 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 I've been saying that for 20 years. But then I was like, maybe it's redefined. Maybe it's 78%. Maybe it's 82. So I would jump back into it all right. I have to be right, because I wanted the book to be bulletproof. I didn't want to be spreading misinformation. And I just have to be right. So it makes me super delightful to be married to. So
exactly.
So here I go into the soy and mind blown, because there are 2 estrogen receptors in our body, and they seem to cluster in different places. The breast cancer receptor is an alpha receptor with 1,600% more affinity. The phytoestrogens like genistein in soy hit the beta receptor. Okay, well, what do they do there? 2 amazing anti-cancer things. Number 1, it shuts alpha down. It blocks the receptor on the breast cancer. And number 2, it goes out into your fat cells. There's an enzyme called aromatase, and it takes precursor steroids like androstenedione. You're probably familiar, right, with DHEA, the whole testosterone sequence that a lot of pro athletes want to amp up. They take that aromatase enzyme, they take those steroids and the aromatase in your fat cells, turns it into estrogen. Soy, sitting in the beta throne, goes out there and shuts aromatase down. I have data now that stems back to 2009, and that is where it all begins. In 2009, we didn't really have human studies proving that high versus low soy consumption would decrease breast cancer. And the very early ones were often just in Asian cultures, but I have some exciting updates for you, because Asians eat enough soy to actually show a disparity between high and low consumption, right? So there was a Shanghai women's study, looked at 73,000 Chinese women, 59% less premenopausal breast cancer for high versus low soy consumption. 59% drop. American Asians with a childhood intake of just, get this, 1.5 servings a week. That's a cup, less than a cup of soy milk a week. 58% less adult onset breast cancer. Soy has such superpowers, though, that it's not just about the estrogen connection. It has anti-neoplastic powers, like it's anti-angiogenic, right? Anti-IGF-1, because there's a study in Korean BRCA gene mutation carriers. If you have a BRCA1 mutation, It's almost a flip on the stat. I had said 80% of us generally get an estrogen-driven breast cancer, but if you have BRCA1, 75% of those cancers don't care about estrogen. So soy shouldn't affect them, right?
Mm-hmm.
High versus low, BRCA carrier, high versus low soy consumption, 43% less breast cancer. So that's amazing because it really shows you that there's more to soy than we're even truly understanding in terms of its anti-cancer powers. The most recent study I love the best because it's a slice of America, and it just came out in October 2020. It's from Loma Linda here in California. 52,000 North American women were followed for 7.9 years. I like this study because it's the first one I know of where Blacks were included, and at a high number, 29.7% of the consumers were Black. This was looking at soy, but also milk. So basically in that 8-year period, 1,057 breast cancers developed. So now we're going to look at what's going on with dairy milk and soy milk consumption in these women that got breast cancer. And what the study concluded was that you had for the median intakes of soy, so just your average amount of soy drunk on a weekly basis versus that same average amount of dairy milk consumed. If you were a soy consumer instead of a dairy consumer, you had 32% less breast cancer. Now, if we hone in on the milk for a second, total dairy calories, milk, butter, cheese, cream, etc., 22% increase in breast cancer. But when you compare the tippity top, the 90th percentile of dairy milk consumption to the least amount, the 10th percentile, 50% increase in breast cancer. So this is a very powerful study because it's followed people for a long time, and it's a real slice of American life, and it really vilifies dairy milk, in my opinion, but no one's going to hang a hat on just a single study. So then the next question becomes, all right, I hear what you're saying, that's super exciting, but what if I already have an estrogen-driven breast cancer? Wouldn't it be a little risky to be eating the soy now? No. So now I've got more studies, all since 2009 for you. One followed 2,000 multi-ethnic survivors on tamoxifen. So they were on that anti-estrogen drug that blocks the alpha receptor, sits in it and blocks it. 60% less recurrence. Oh, maybe that was all the tamoxifen. All right, let me give you a 2017 study. 6,200 American multi-ethnic survivors with breast cancer followed for 9+ years. 32% drop in recurrence and death without tamoxifen. And if it was and those are estrogen positive cancers. Estrogen driven cancers, 32% less recurrence and death. Get this, 51% less death in estrogen negative cancers. I've got more studies, 2 more studies that show a decrease in mortality and recurrence that kind of echo this 32%. Comes up over and over in the next 2 studies as well. So breast cancer patients, 5,000 of them, 29% less death, 32% less recurrence. Another really big one, 9,500 breast cancer survivors, a half a cup of soy milk a day. Not much. Plop that in your oats, your steel cut oats or your smoothie, 25% drop in recurrence. So everybody out there who is a disbeliever, you can put your fears aside. Soy consumption in every single human study to date shows less breast cancer occurrence, recurrence, and death. So soy it up, the younger the better.
It sounds like it's not only so it's any breast cancer, it helps. Does it also help for cancer in general?
It does. There's that same about 32% decrease in prostate cancer occurrence for men who consume soy. You don't have to worry about what I call it gynecomastia. You might call it man boobs. People worry, oh, if I drink all that soy, I'm going to get breasts with all the estrogen, right? Well, again, we're coming back to the alpha and beta receptors. And there are literally, I read them. They are case reports, like one 19-year-old boy who was drinking a gallon of soy milk a day for months on end, sprouted breasts. So yeah, anything in excess, I will tell you, IGF-1, remember our bad growth promoter, well, not bad, it's we'd be dead without it, but with too much, it's bad. Our growth promoter, I was curious to know if plant protein, right, ever elevated IGF-1 in excess, because all the studies make a point of saying IGF-1 goes up, but only for animal protein, not plant protein. It turns out your IGF-1 will go up if you have 6 servings of soy a day. And I don't know about 4 and 5 servings, but it is proven safe in 3 servings. So that's why my daily amount for women to reduce breast cancer, occurrence, recurrence, and death is 2 to 3 servings daily. Of what? Well, always non-GMO. You know that a big 16-ounce block of organic tofu is $1.99. I mean, it's not expensive food. So go organic with this one. 94% of all soy crops in America are GMO. They're dumped on with pesticides and glyphosate and the like. But most of that, if not almost all of it, is fed to the cows and the pigs and the chickens. So if you're not eating the animals, you're actually it's really easy to find soy that's soy milk. The first ingredient must be whole organic soybeans, right? You just want to make sure that the first ingredient isn't like added sugar or something crazy. Water could be the first ingredient instead of the soy, but make it organic. And then I get asked a lot about just what food. So fermented soy might be a little easier on your digestive system, but maybe not on your palate if you're not used to soy. So that's the world of tempeh, miso, natto, and tamari, like soy sauce. The next level of foods that are soy-based, though, think about it. Those are the foods that are in these studies I just quoted. It was soy milk and tofu. It wasn't natto, which is a little hard on the palate if you haven't had it. It's like this crazy bean paste. So tofu, edamame, soybeans, and soy milk. The next level, I'm not going to say you have to avoid it because it's going to be bad for you as a soy protein isolate, but usually, almost always, what it's used in is not that good for you. It's like it's like the meat substitute burgers that are then packed with palm oil and coconut oil and no fiber, and they're meant to mimic the saturated fat load and the salt of like a real burger, right? So these fake burgers that use soy protein isolate probably has been divorced of most of its phytoestrogen power. So if you're aiming to use soy as a anti-cancer weapon, I wouldn't be eating those patties.
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned we've learned a lot about growth via IGF-1, and I've really learned how much we actually want anti-growth to be happening as adults, right? As children, like you have to grow into adulthood. But as adults, what do you say to maybe an athlete who's trying to grow muscle, or a woman who comes in and is trying to gain weight, that is, for whatever reasons they might be trying to actually grow some?
Mm-hmm. It's all about caloric density. So caloric density has to do with, if I'm eating a grape, you can already know there's a lot of water in that, right? So I'd have to eat a lot of grapes to get the calorie content of an avocado, which doesn't leak juice when you cut it in half, right? So to someone who's looking to bulk up, we have to consume our calories wisely. And as 100% vegan, plant-based, now 11 and a half triplet boys, I am very in tune with this because they do need their IGF-1 up. They do need to grow. So I'm very jealous because they get to, eat nuts and seeds and dried fruit, which has all that water shrunk out of it. And it's just a kind of a bit of a sugar bomb with fiber, though, et cetera. So they get to have all the dates and dried fruits they want, avocados and olives, kind of higher fat foods. They get to eat that, ad libitum, and I have to curb it, or, have more of the fresh leafy greens. They get to eat, the athletes wanting to bulk up, seitan, soy, lentils, the beans, peas, nuts, seeds, quinoa, wild rice. All of these have a lot of protein and are going to fill you up, and you're not going to be starving if you feed a pro athlete just salad after salad and smoothie after smoothie. They're going to bottom out.
Yeah. Okay. So then I was worried more about the growth, the cancer growth. So if you're whole food plant-based, you're not really worried about that. It's if you're eating an animal-based food and then you're sparking all the IGF-1 to grow, and it'll grow you and the cancer cells. And that's where the problem arises.
Exactly. And exactly. The only plants that are going to increase IGF-1 are going to be high protein and you eating ridiculous volumes, like the boy in the story having a gallon of soy milk a day.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about it with plants. You Your IGF-1 will be exactly what your brain said was needed for your liver today.
Okay.
You've mentioned strawberries and we've talked about soy. What are some other really powerful cancer fighting foods that our audience can go out right away and get?
So right away, you want to every single day be eating at least a half a cup, if not more, of broccoli or any of the cruciferous vegetables. But broccoli sprouts are king amongst all of it. And the reason is something called sulforaphane. So the power in sulforaphane blows my mind to seek out and destroy cancer cells. It stops initiation of cancer cells, promotion, and then metastases. Sulforaphane is not in the broccoli or the broccoli sprout. It is kind of like a secret weapon and these cell compartments inside of the green vegetables. So you have to chomp on the broccoli to release the cell wall that's made of fiber, and then chomp on another compartment that releases the enzyme called myrosinase that turns the precursor to sulforaphane, which is called an isothiocyanate, into sulforaphane. So now you have your green cape superhero in the broccoli, sulforaphane, working to fight off cancers. Myrosinase, the enzyme, is destroyed by the heat and cooking. So if your favorite vegetable on planet Earth is mine, which is roasted broccoli, here are a few tips and tricks to get your myrosinase back so you're getting all the bang for your broccoli. You want to chop up a bunch of raw broccoli, the little florets, right? Just get a bunch of raw broccoli and just blanket it over your roasted broccoli. And boom, your enzyme's back. Mustard also has it. Mustard seeds. So you could take, studies show it's just a pinch that's needed on your serving of broccoli and the myrosinase will be back. Whole grain mustard on the side will do it too. Or thyme. You can just chop up your broccoli and it needs 45 minutes for those little cell compartments to mix and create the magic. And then you can roast it and it'll already be there. But I always just pair it with some of the raw stuff, even arugula. Now, broccoli sprouts have 100 times the sulforaphane content that broccoli has. So that's truly magical. And there's
those are good in salads.
It's so good on salads. It's really good on a little vegan sandwich if you're making one on some whole grain toast. There was a study that blew my mind because it looked at stem cells. Stem cells they can be anything you need them to be inside your body. They have these properties where they can migrate and colonize and proliferate. They have self-renewal, right? They're immortal cells. I was taught in medical school that you are born with a finite number and then, use them wisely, kid, because that's all you're getting. Turns out, no, you can make more. And the best way to do that is to fast, but that's another topic. Stick with the broccoli for a second. Okay, so what if a cancer cell took over the power of a stem cell? Now you have an immortal cancer cell. And that is pretty new in our scientific understanding that there are such things as breast cancer and other cancer stem cells. It's like the epicenter of the whole thing. So if there's one hanging out somewhere in your body, it's spewing out little baby cancer cells to go metastasize, you've got to annihilate it. We typically use our chemical weapons, literal chemical, like chemotherapy and tamoxifen and such, to try to shrink these tumors down. But check this out. Now, caveat, it is a study in mice. And sorry, I know that science can be cruel. So they took these mice and they grafted estrogen-driven and estrogen-negative breast cancer stem cells onto the mice. And then they had them eat the equivalent of 1.25 cups of broccoli sprouts a day. So granted, that's quite the fistful, but it's also like doable, especially if you have an advanced cancer and you want to be like powering down anti-cancer food. So they eat this, and the grafted cancer, literally gone in a matter of weeks. So broccoli is incredibly powerful. The whole cruciferous family has been shown in many studies. Wheel is a favorite of mine because it's in just breast cancer patients, over 3,000 of them, randomized controlled trial into a high vegetable, low fat diet or just your usual diet. And 2 years after diagnosis, there was a 31% drop in recurrence for the highest versus lowest third of cruciferous vegetable intake. And amongst tamoxifen users for estrogen positive, it was 52%. So again, we're seeing these studies, or I am as I watch them, where you can't attribute it just to the tamoxifen because just without tamoxifen, you get a pretty impressive number. And then of course, the drugs also do their job and add a layer of protection on top.
Yeah. So every single year, as you know, Breast Cancer Awareness Month rolls around, and we see pink ribbons everywhere, including on Yoplait yogurts, at the grocery store, everywhere you go, and at the Susan G. Komen races. Yoplait, I think, is one of their main or dominant sponsors. How do you feel about the dairy companies supporting breast cancer research? I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind, knowing all that you know?
Intensely hypocritical. Maybe they bury their own heads in the sands of their own paid for research and they don't see a connection. And that is one of the troubles of truly vilifying dairy, like nailing it to the wall when it comes to breast cancer risk, because dairy has some redemptive qualities in the form of calcium, nothing you need dairy for, believe me,
Right.
But calcium, vitamin D, butyrate, lactoferrin, conjugated linolenic acid, these are healthful properties. But you would think that on the other side of that scale in dairy, hormones, elevating IGF-1, fat, saturated fat, trans fat, pesticide residues, antibiotics, aflatoxins, you would think all of that would maybe just, boom, make the scales tip toward, no, dairy's bad, people. And unfortunately, as it relates to breast cancer, the studies fall all over the map. Sometimes you find that dairy doesn't have a causal connection at all. Other times it even seems protective. Other times it's greatly implicated in causing breast cancer. So I looked through them, not all of them, there's bajillions, but I looked through the high volume ones, that have they're good studies and not funded by dairy. And this is what emerges as a repeat theme. It's not just looking at dairy. You have to look at high fat versus low fat dairy. Even in some low fat studies will show a connection to breast cancer, but the high fat ones really do. So LACE is a good study that looked at almost 2,000 early stage breast cancer patients. They were followed for 11.8 years. And what I like about this is listen to how little the difference is. Having one or more daily servings of high fat dairy versus a half a serving or less of high fat dairy led to a 49% increase in all-cause mortality. If you'd had a vegan group, right? If you'd had a non-dairy, that is a fraction of a difference. You're having 1 cup and I'm having just under half a cup. And yet there's almost a 50-50 split between mortality because of that half cup difference. I'd love to see a wider disparity. Mm-hmm. A different study showed that butter, margarine, and lard, margarine, which can be plant-based, 67% increase in breast cancer recurrence. And if you look at the highest versus lowest third of consumption, 212% increase in breast cancer mortality. Butter, margarine, and lard. So again, it's not just vegan, it's whole food plant-based when we're talking about the healthiest way to eat to combat cancer and to maximally reduce your risk. There's another really powerful study because it was all breast cancer patients. None of them had recurred, over 4,000 of them. And then they were followed for 7 years and 3% of them died. When they looked at fat and death, the highest versus lowest, trans fat consumers were 78% more likely to have died from breast cancer, and the saturated fat, high versus low, were 41% more likely to have died. Wow. So, one of our richest sources of saturated fat and trans is going to be dairy, especially when it's all 10 pounds of milk make 1 pound of cheese. Yeah. So you're 10 times the amount of saturated fat, which people, think is just ooey gooey, salty, stretchable deliciousness, but it's really deadly. It's deadly dairy, people.
Yeah, there you go.
Can I ask a personal question as somebody who has been in menopause for several years, and I have been taking bioidentical hormones for 10 years. And I wanted to know your thoughts on hormones, and just give it to me straight, because I've heard the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
right.
So I'd like to hear it from you because I respect you very much.
Well, I appreciate that respect. This is a delicate issue because the problem with the bioidenticals is simply that they haven't been studied. There aren't randomized controlled trials, and they come in so many methods of delivery, right? You can have creams, you can have pellets, you can be taking it orally, and they sound so beneficial and friendly, the bioidenticals, because they come from some of our best friends like soy and yams, right? So you think though, but there are no large volume trials that test them for efficacy and safety. And, we've seen in the commercially available Prempro's horse's urine, for example, that those studies show an absolute indefinite increase in breast cancer. The biggest study was the WHI, the Women's Health Initiative, that randomly separated, I think it was, I'm forgetting now, 70,000. It was a lot of women were given either the placebo or Prempro, and they halted the study after 5.2 years as on an ethical basis, because it was so obvious that Prempro was causing 26% more breast cancer and also an increase in heart attacks, dementia, and stroke. So they halted that study.
And that's estrogen. That's only estrogen, because I take testosterone and progesterone also, but Premarin and Prempro, those are all simply estrogen from a pregnant mare's urine, which, as Dotsie and I would never be able to take because of our ethical stance.
Right. So that's estrogen plus progesterone that was in that study. Then that study went on to look at just the estrogen only users, and it turned out that there was it gets really complicated. It was a protective effect against breast cancer if you're only using estrogen and not progesterone. But the protective effect was only for 10 years and not longer than 10 years use, and not if you used it in the first 5 years after going through menopause, which is when you're hot flashing your way to a divorce and need it, right? Like, so the estrogen only isn't necessarily good. So my only hesitation with the bioidenticals, which I sure hope it's safe, because there are literally somewhere between 26 and 33 million bioidentical prescriptions every year. Right. So I hope they're not eventually implicated in causing breast cancer. But you have to think about back to alpha and beta receptors. Most of what your bioidenticals should be just honing in on beta receptors and not the alpha because of their food source. Mm-hmm. But basically, at the end of the day, I advocate for just an intelligent conversation. Like, why are you on the hormones? Because we don't have the studies that prove their safety. So is it for hot flashes? Because acupuncture works well. Soy consumption on a daily basis works well. I didn't formulate it. I own, through our Pink Lotus Element store, a product called Menopause Miracle that has 3 randomized controlled trials behind it in women against placebo. It's simply 3 Asian herbs. They did blood draws for estrogen levels, and actually all major menopause symptoms are alleviated in over 90% of women, and the only side effect is increasing bone density and lowering LDL cholesterol. So it's not
that, it's sex, baby. It's sex. It's having sex, not hurt. Yes, that's what they call it, but it's not that. It's like the puffiness of it going down. So it literally feels like wood on wood, if you will. But it's not dry.
Right. So yeah, it's called, the fancy word is dyspareunia, painful sex, because of that dry shriveling up vagina. And so a couple of things. Estrogen inserted into the vagina has very little to no systemic absorption, and I don't have a problem with that even in cancer patients if needed. But again, I have another product at Pink Lotus Elements. It's called Carboxy Therapy. So you mix 2 packets together, and just like, so you know how you like laser your skin or needle it, do micro needling, you create injury, and it looks crazy for a second, but then boom, all this blood flow comes to heal and repair it, and lo and behold, your wrinkles are less and there's more collagen. Now this injury is much less severe, although there are lasers that do that same kind of thing for the vagina, right? Mona Lisa Touch, the Thermiva, they create injury that enhance collagen and moisture. This is carbon dioxide. So it diffuses through the vaginal wall, and immediately you get oxygen and growth factors coming to the area to combat the carbon dioxide. And so you mix these packets together, it turns into a little gel that you just pull up into the syringe that comes in it. You squirt it up there like you would push a tampon in, and then rub the rest of it out on the outside and just hang out for 45 minutes. That's all it works for. It's like not active after that. And then you rinse it out. And even after just one use, People are saying sex is no longer painful, but it's if you have severe dryness and medication induced like chemo, it's generally once a week for 9 weeks and then just once a month for maintenance. So if your only reason is your dry vagina, you could overlap your bioidenticals, get your vagina all prepped with it's called CO2 lift, and then you could try to taper off your bioidenticals and see what happens to the little girl vault down there. I've got solutions, and it really matters most in those high risk for breast cancer or those who have already had it, right? Because any little additional food source for that cancer is probably a bad idea.
The vaginal estrogen works amazing for me. Like after only like 3 times, it was like, it just stopped hurting. But I get some acne. So I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like painful sex or acne. Like I'm still having to freaking choose.
Wow. Yeah. That's a tough one. It's either for your husband or for everybody else. Do I want them looking at my clean skin?
Or for me, right? Like they hurt. Like, they're like this. I've always had cystic and so they're painful and they're annoying, and I don't want acne at 48. Thank you. Just don't want it anymore.
I know. That's funny. I just told the boys the other day, I'm like, the reason why I don't look 51 is because I still get acne. And I was all mad about it. Well, I encourage you to try it. We have rave reviews on the little CO2 packets. But there's so much we could talk about. But I do think I'm so excited about the work you're doing and spreading the message of just how dairy is. I have so much to say about how we're duped, and how as a physician, I was just duped by the silence of it all. And I'm excited that you have this great big platform and that I'm invited on it to talk to everybody.
We want to give your platforms a shout out too, because you have your own podcast, which is called Cancer Kicking Powwow. And I want to encourage everybody, if they love the energy of Dr. Funk and all the knowledge that she has, to go there, because they will learn so much. And also, of course, there's your book, Breasts, an Owner's Manual, which people should pick up if they want to know any other information.
I would like to tell everybody a couple of things because it's so important to me and it's like my life's work. One is my upcoming summit. It's called Cancer Kicking Summit. Okay. It is virtual in April and live at the gorgeous Oceanfront Terranea Resort in October every year. So we'll keep this evergreen. Go to pinklotus.com/summit and see when the next one is. It is transformative. I mean, I do a big deep dive, of course, into food, but it's way more than that. We really get into your mind and your thoughts and your stress, and packed with powerful, everything from like weight loss tips to detoxifying your house. It's really transformative and fun, and the camaraderie in the live sessions is just outrageous. So please join me at my summit. And anybody who's ever had breast cancer or knows someone who had breast cancer, please encourage them to join the completely free group called Breast Buddies. So pinklotus.com again /breast buddies, or just breastbuddies.com will take you there. This is important to me. Another LACE study, this Life After Cancer Epidemiology study, we quoted as showing increased mortality for high milk consumption. But the study also looked at something very fascinating, and that was the percent likelihood that someone would have died because, let me say this again. So these 2,200 early stage breast cancer patients, right? They're followed for an average low levels of psychosocial support and or a lack of religious participation were 58% more likely to have died in the study period than those who reported high levels of support. That is how important our psychosocial mind-body connection is. And, not everybody has a family they like, and not everybody has a BFF, but everybody can have a breast buddy. So what this is, and there are already over 5,000 members in Breast Buddies. Again, totally free. You go in there and you put like your age, say 52, mastectomy, chemotherapy, and like Match.com for your breasts. Everybody who's 52 who had a mastectomy is going to pop up. And then you can look and you'll be like, oh my gosh, she is an 8-year-old. I want to talk to her. and then you connect. So people who have been there, done that are on there, and people who are newly diagnosed are paired together solely for the purposes of social support and encouragement and love and friendship. So please encourage anyone you know with breast cancer to join. And then I also have Power Up, which is my entire community that has over 15,000 members, also totally free, has all the functionality, well, not all, like most of the functionality of Facebook. So you can go on there and put your picture and you can comment on things and go into chat rooms and be like, who hates tamoxifen? And then start chatting away about tamoxifen. It has Breast List, which is like Craigslist, but you can buy, sell, give away, trade your gently used wigs and bras and things that you never want to see again, but you paid a pretty penny for.
Yeah.
So you do that. It's got something called Crowd Cause that's like GoFundMe, but cheaper. So if you have a financial need to help you through your cancer treatment, you just post about it and people will donate securely and safely through there. So it's just a real fun,
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a blooming community, and I invite everybody to join. The community is about being a woman and having breasts and wanting a healthy life. Like just being a woman is a reason to join the community. And then Breast Buddies is just for the cancer folks.
Beautiful. That was amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank
Terrific.
you. Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.